On the surface, these videos look like some old guy talking about some old verses. But if you've been with me for a while, I hope you're appreciating there's something more going on. And that these old verses are pointing us to something. And what this old guy here is doing is saying, look, this is what these verses are doing. They're pointing us to something. And this something that it's pointing us to, I'm inviting you to take a look at, because you can look at this and it's something very, very wonderful that these verses are pointing to. It is something wonderful that you have access to. And I'm hoping that if you've been watching these videos for a while, you can enter into this. You can actually, even before I've started speaking, look at what these verses are pointing to. And in that, you can relax. You can relax in spaciousness. You can relax in lovingness, because you can see where these verses are pointing to. And now the next few verses that are coming up are to do with fire and the ego. We can really only relax into spacious lovingness when we appreciate the nature of the world. But we also need to appreciate the nature of our own individuality. We need to relax from that. I'm in quite a good situation at the moment. I gave up my night shift job. I'm going to have to get another job at some point, and there's a possibility, I was thinking when I gave up the night shift job, I'd get anxious about what I'm going to do next. I'd get worried, because this is my tendency. This is part of my individual nature. But I've managed to keep a check on that. And physically, although my diagnosis seems to have settled into one of arthritis, and I've still got trouble moving, the pain, discomfort and distress that I was experiencing doesn't seem to be so prevalent. So that's not so bad. And it's summertime here, and my wife continues to be beautiful and loving most of the time. So things are pretty good. Things are pretty good. But there's still stuff going on. There's still stuff going on in what I might call my own ego individuality. There are still things I get a little bit obsessed by or upset by. I get into these discussions on Facebook. I really shouldn't, but I take it I get quite involved. Sometimes I can't even sleep, and this was the case last night. But I decided just to focus on the breathing, do some mindfulness of breathing, and not just do mindfulness of breathing as I was lying in bed, because you need to be careful doing this sort of exercise. If you're not doing it lovingly and from a good space, then it's a very uncomfortable experience. A slight digression here. I think sometimes if just the act of physically sitting can be quite stressful, and if your body's not trained to do this, then you're going to find it difficult to be loving in your mindfulness. So just watch out for that one. But this worked. This worked. I also was touching what I was just talking about. I wasn't simply doing the mindfulness of breathing. I wasn't simply doing it with lovingness. I found the lovingness. I directed myself to the lovingness, which is in this pure awareness that as enlightenment practitioners we keep coming back to. So this is what the emphasis in these next few verses is. It's about working with our own ego, our own individuality. And the way these verses do this is to dismantle any such notion. There's just certain stuff going on. That stuff is summed up in the Buddhist wheel of life, in particular the 12 nidanas, which have been covered in the past. But I'll say more about that shortly. As I said, the next few verses talk about fire. And I think it's important to appreciate that in ancient Indian thought, fire was taken to reside within wood, for example. Whatever burns, it was a question of releasing the fire that was already in the wood. And once it's released, it needs to be fanned so that it can take root. So this is, I think, an important thing to appreciate. Fire in ancient Indian thought is something that is already there in a substance. It's just a matter of releasing it. And I think there's a metaphor or an analogy going on here that the ego is something in a certain process which needs to be released and fanned. Anyway, let's see what we make of it. The verses I don't think are particularly helpful, but we'll see what we can make of them. Verse 856. The wind indeed makes fire burn, but it only incites and does not produce. Further incited by it, the fire goes out. How can the ego of a sentient being be established? So I think the point here is that whatever nurtures the ego of a sentient being also puts it out. And I think this is actually quite true, isn't it? Our ego is constantly under attack. I'm getting involved in these discussions, but I find it very intense, because I don't like being put into a box. I don't like to be regarded as somebody who holds particular views. This is what you do when you get involved in a discussion. People start assuming you hold certain views, even though you haven't said that you hold these views. I find that quite upsetting. The best solution for me is just not to go on Facebook or to stop following a certain thread, which is what I've taken to doing actually. And it's quite a relief. Why am I getting involved in these discussions in the first place? Well, there's so much nonsense going on. There's so much nonsense being spouted. And it doesn't matter how intelligent people are. The most intelligent people just happen to be able to dress up their nonsense in intelligence. But then again, who am I to say? Who am I to be concerned with this? So when I engage from an ego point of view, that ego is under attack. It's nice when some people give a little like to a comment I make. My ego likes that. It's nice to know there's somebody on my side. But that doesn't actually happen very often. And I tend to tread where angels might otherwise fear to tread, with the feeling that somebody's got to do it. And I've even been justifying it in terms of, well, Buddhists are argumentative. Buddhists are argumentative. This text is argumentative. It puts down every other point of view. So, if you see things, or believe you see things clearly, then surely you should point this out, even at the risk of getting shot down. Yes, perhaps, but we have to look at the ego dynamic that's involved here. And if there is an ego dynamic, it's best to leave it alone. Because what nurtures that ego is going to also attack the ego. So perhaps that's the point we can take out of this verse. How does this ego get established? I suppose the ego can grow also in adversity. But that's not really the point of the verse. I think the point is just to distance ourselves from situations which either promote the ego or attack the ego. The next few verses continue this theme of fire, and I think what I'll do though is continue in the next video.